So how did One Seed Church begin? In 2017, God was calling my family and I to do more with our life than what we had been doing so far. And so I felt this tug that I couldn't get out of my mind. I'd wake up with this burden, this anxiety, and I felt like God was telling us to spread the gospel in some way. And so I was going to do it through social media. And quickly I learned that that was not enough. It wasn't satisfying this burden I felt. And so God said, you need to meet real people face to face. So we decided to do a Bible study. And as we were preparing to invite the community to do a Bible study in 2017, I quickly knew in my heart that that was not going to be enough and it needed to be a church. So I started ordering sound equipment and I started buying plastic totes and donation dishes and everything I could think of that a new church would need. I started putting together and planning what that process would look like, knowing in my heart I had not yet revealed that that January would be when we launched One Seed Church. So what was our first service like? Well, it got canceled because a forecasted snowstorm was to hit January 7th, 2018. And I knew that our first service wouldn't be our best service, so I specifically didn't advertise the first two services. I waited till January 21st to say we were having service because I wanted a couple practice runs because I knew we'd hit speed bumps that we couldn't have prepared for until we were in it. And funny enough, the snowstorm didn't happen, but we canceled service on the 7th in fear of ice and snow. And so we had our first service on January 14th, and there was only about 8 of us. There was me, my nephew, my mom and dad, my wife and kids, Cameron, and we did have one couple I remember that came in. We were so unprepared, I didn't prep enough time to do the setup that we were 30 minutes late before we started the worship, did the sermon, and they sat there and they waited the entire time, and then they gave us a connection card and a donation. So I was humbly moved that people cared enough, and I didn't know if it was pity or they actually got value out of the service, but either way, another step was taken. Some of the things we experienced early on that no one else would care or know about, but the little things that we're going to remember looking back on this first year are little things like the setup team. You know, we really bonded. For a while it was me, my nephew, and Cameron, another church family member, and we would set up these signs and the wind would blow them over and the signs had to be hammered in the ground, and the ground was frozen and rock hard, and the stakes kept breaking, and I kept having to order new stakes to hold these signs up, and that system just wasn't working. And we, throughout this process over time, had people vandalize our signs a couple times, and I always shouted for joy because I felt like the devil was trying to stop us. Someone had snapped one of our flag signs off the side of the road. Someone had knocked one of our A-frame signs into the intersection and bent the frame up, and things like that no one knows about, but we know about it, and we'll remember those moments as time goes on and we look back. Some of the funny things that I think about and remember and am grateful now that I don't have to do are like I'd have to prep that trailer on Sunday mornings, middle of winter, and part of prepping was putting the gas in the generators that we use to run our air dancers by the road, because we like to go big and it takes gasoline to run those big old 20-foot air dancers, and there's 5 of them. Because, you know, one's not enough. I felt like we had to have 5 to really get people's attention. And I would spill the gas every Sunday morning before church on my hands, and it was backbreaker because you'd have to hunch over, fill the generators with the 5-gallon tank, and it was super awkward, and I always spilt it, and it'd get all over my garage, and then I get frustrated, and then I go take my shower, and I still smell like gas. But thankfully now we've surpassed that process. Another funny thing that happened quite frequently in the first part of the year when we were just getting going is the foyer alarms would continually go off in the foyer of the auditorium, and so no one could turn them off because you had to have the special key, and evidently like that person wasn't working that day, and so this alarm would be going off and it'd really make you crazy, and so you just had to pretend it wasn't happening, and Sunday school would still go on, and the message would still go on, and the worship would still go on, but the foyer alarm was still going on sometimes, and people weren't too happy, but it is what it is. We had to deal with it because that's all we had to work with. Live streaming, yeah, it's really cool, but it's also really hard to do well unless you've got a lot of resources to know how to handle the technical. And we've come a long way, but it's been a battle, and we are now proud of where we've come because we've seen all the little victories in the live streaming arena, from computer issues to bandwidth issues to other issues, just getting our broadcast out to the world and making it look good so it looks like we can share this content comfortably knowing it's high quality. People always ask me if it was hard to start a church, and the short answer is it's very hard, but really it's so fulfilling to me that anything that has value takes hard work. And I knew the biggest hurdle with starting the church to really show me, can this thing succeed? Is this God's will? Is if people came and if people came back. And so in the beginning, when there was no one, the biggest question was, can we share God's word in a way that people will want to come back for more? And some didn't, and some did. And those who could see the vision of where we're trying to go came back, and they became what I call pillars. And now we're building pillars in our church, getting ready to go into our second year because we stuck with it. So it's really exciting to see people coming, and I know now it's not if, it's just when, because God has shown that this is part of His plan. The funny thing is we just ordered this new trailer, and when I bought the first trailer, I remember standing in the parking lot at the trailer place, and the biggest one they had was a 24-foot by 8.5 feet wide cargo trailer, and we ended up ordering the same trailer about 8 months in because we were ready to move to that step with our equipment and our sound equipment. We needed more space. So I got the trailer and everything was awesome and ready to go, and I was driving to service, and on day one we were pulling our new trailer from an RV park off Highway Z, and I was driving through the intersection about 8 in the morning, and another gentleman came right across the intersection, and it was a head-on collision, and I flipped the truck, and all the equipment that was in my truck kind of went AWOL. The trailer went up on its back end. I went into a ditch, flipped on my side, totaled the truck. I was okay. I had banged up my neck. Instantly, I felt some severe pain in my hand, but I was conscious, and all I could think was to get out of that truck, because I've seen stories about, trucks catching fire and all this crazy stuff. So my guitar and my phone were in the bottom of the truck, and I thought, do I want to try to get that phone? And I said, no, I just got to get out. So I crawled out of the top, and I was quickly greeted by onlookers asking if I needed help. Someone had called 911, and in seconds, the intersection was swarmed with ambulance, fire truck, onlookers, and witnesses. And all I could think about in that moment was, how am I going to fix what had just been taken from this church? That's all I could think about. And I had forgotten about my faith for a minute, because I forgot that God put it in place and God can restore it. But in the moment I was so emotional, all I could think about is, how am I going to redo all this preparation of all those totes that were in the trailer? They were organized a certain way to make the setup so efficient, and all that was going through my head as I sit on the curb waiting for the ambulance. It wasn't logical, but that's just what happened, and it took about a day for me to reflect back on what had happened, and to really realize how grateful I was just to be alive, and that I came out pretty clean. I had a little neck injury and a little banged up hand, but it could have been much worse. It was so moving to see all the people come together in such a low point. Such good came out of it, and that was truly the hand of God showing that this church is more than just a show. It's a ministry, and it's a move of God. And though we like things to look good, and we want to live stream, and we want to have good worship and lights and all that stuff, at the end of the day, this is a ministry, and there's real roots behind what we're doing. So that really touched me. So now, headed into the end of our first year, I can say things evolved perfectly according to God's will, according to His timeline. As much as I was so concerned with people wanting to come to our church, and I wanted to make sure they felt fed when they came to our church, we've seen that God has put His anointing on what we're doing. So now we don't need to worry about if, we just know it's a timeline thing, that we have to be faithful and stay dedicated, and He's going to continue to grow His church. That this first year was really about building pillars under One Seed Church, that without that foundation, we would crumble in subsequent years. And so now I know, going into 2019, we have a handle on the process. We have a handle on what our church looks like and how to execute God's plan according to the purpose He's put on us to deliver His will to the world. And so we have built these pillars in our congregation, in our church family, and we're excited to see where God's going to take it, because we are faithful to the end, and we're going to continue to plow and watch God bring the harvest. What some thought was just a crazy, ridiculous idea to start another church right here in Lake St. Louis. Now we've seen that God had a reason, and God is continuing to grow as we stay faithful. So we're excited to see what the future holds for One Seed Church. We hope to see you soon.
Storms are poured into my life, but you were there, I know, shedding all my tears and shame. The depths of hell can't shake me now, 'cause it's in your name. Jesus, I follow, lead me to shelter. You are my stronghold. Jesus, I follow.